Okay, welcome students. I appreciate you following us here. If I don't screw this up, which I tend to usually do, let me make this slide maybe a little bit bigger. There we go. I hope that worked. Students, we have the opportunity to hear from a real expert today. Dr. Teal has joined us, and you see these questions. They're questions that should be familiar to all of you because they're the same questions I'm asking you to ask the HR personnel in your district. So you'll be able to have a little barometer to measure, your district's responses from what you hear from Dr. Teal today. But before we get to the questions, I want Dr. Teal to, if she would please introduce herself to my students and let them know about your background and your credentials so they can feel good about the information you're about to share with them.
Absolutely. And first, let me say thank you so much for asking me to do this. I'm absolutely honored to do this. And my background is in special education. So I may be starting off in the beginning with all of them saying, why in the world does she know anything about HR? But there are lots of ways that being in special education has prepared me for this job. I have my undergrad is from UGA in special ed. I have a master's in 6-year in special education and leadership from the University of West Georgia. And then my doctorate is in educational administration from the University of Alabama. I have taught or tested in grades K through 12, was a special ed coordinator and director for 10 years. And then this is my 10th year as assistant superintendent of human resources and student services. And along with that, there's lots and lots of training, including school level law, lots of ongoing HR training with the Professional Standards Commission, with our state, and lots of other ways that we are kept abreast of what we should be doing in human resources. So that's a little bit about my background.
Perfect. Thanks for that. I appreciate that. Some of our students may know you. We have a lot of local students. I may even have a Carroll County student or two in the class. I'm not sure at this point, starting this semester.
Right. But, hey, and we're always hiring. So anybody that wants to come be one of ours, you can.
You and everybody in the state probably, right?
Yes.
Well, let's talk about the planning process the district goes through. Planning for staffing is such a huge, significant portion of any school district's budget. Christy, can you hit on the high points about what the district staffing process looks like in Carroll County, and then roughly kind of the time parameters that you're working on that?
Yes, absolutely. And I do want to say too that while I'm going to give you our timeline, know that there is some fluidity to it. It is a fluid process. And so everything is not linear as the way I'm going to describe it, but I think this will give you a good idea of how it works. And the first thing is about October, we get a report from a company who contracts with us in long range planning. So they look at new housing developments, they look at planned developments, they look at birth rates, they look at how many students we currently have, how many students are currently on waivers from other districts. They look at everything under the sun you can think of, and then they do that for each of our communities. So unlike some districts, we serve some very distinct communities, Villa Rica, Mount Zion, Bowden, Temple, Rooteville, Whitesburg, and parts of Carrollton. So they have to take that all into consideration because it looks different in each different community, and then impacts each individual school differently. So that data is then given to us. We get it for the following year. Per school, per grade level. We get it for 5 years out, 10 years out, and then even 20 years out, so that we have an idea of what's coming. Now, of course, when you start getting past 10 years out, that certainly is a very subject to change, but at least we have an idea of where we're heading. And I will tell you, just for Carroll County schools, we're looking at tremendous growth over the next 10 to 15 years, tremendous growth. So that is something we know that's coming and that we have to plan for very soon. So after the long range planning, and again, I told you we also get from that company projections for the next year. Mr. Cower also, he is our superintendent. He sits down and looks at those projections with the cabinet members. And then we talk about from the local perspective of what we think is going to happen and take that into consideration as we build those allotments. About November, December, we're getting those projections in place and getting those solidified. February, we send out contracts in February. That's so that we can get an idea of who's going to retire, who's looking to go somewhere else, who's moving, so that we kind of have an idea too of what vacancies we're going to have. Towards the end of February, we send out our allotment sheets to each of our principals. It gives elementary and middle school, they have teachers assigned by grade level or by specialty. So special education teachers, EIP teachers, that kind of thing, connection teachers. 9 through 12, that looks a little bit different in that we give them a number of teachers to serve 9 through 12, and then the principals have to determine what classes they need in order to make sure all of the students are served appropriately. Then right after they get allotment, sometimes before, we start the hiring process 1st of March and get those positions posted and then begin the hiring and onboarding. So that's kind of in a nutshell what the process looks like.
Okay, well, the next question was designed to kind of fold right in that. You know, when you think about that process, are there critical junctures or critical pieces that, you know, you really have to get correct, or you have a mess? I assume there's some things that come to light that are really important in what you just described.
Right. Of course, the projections themselves, that's very, very important. What I would say the most important part of the whole process is the communication from the principals to the district office to the principals, the communication between the departments, especially like our teaching and learning and curriculum departments. They have a pulse of what's going on in the schools. They're out in the schools a lot. So we have a very heavy emphasis on their feedback and what the schools are needing. Special education, they know what students need one-on-one instruction, or what students need one-on-one supports, or how many co-taught classes do we need? So those services are going to dictate how many teachers are there, more so than the number of students. So it's not all clean numbers wise. It is, you know, we have to take into consideration all those other factors. And if we did not communicate, we would miss, and we would underestimate probably 99% of the time how many teachers or paraprofessionals we need in the schools. The other is, so that's getting the allotments correct. So communication is first, allotments, getting that allotment number correct. And then the third thing I would say is the actual hiring as part of that process, and making sure that we get the very best teachers we can get, you know, in the classroom. So that pushes our timeline because everybody in the state is trying to get the very best teachers, and there's not enough to go around. So all of us are trying to do it earlier and earlier and earlier so that we can secure someone in those positions.
Just to follow up, if you don't mind, what's the predominant method of communicating? Meetings that include people from across these different divisions, or what does the communication look like?
Yeah, good question. It looks lots of different ways. Our cabinet, and And that is comprised of all of the assistant superintendents over each area. So over teaching and learning, over finance. And I should not have left them out because they are a huge component in this process in determining if we have the money we need to serve the students we have. So finance, and then operations, HR, and student services. We all meet together once a week, and we're talking about these things. So that is a face-to-face meeting. Then I mentioned that our teaching and learning department, which is over curriculum, that they're out in the schools. We have directors, a director of elementary, a director of middle high. They are out in the schools talking to the principals, looking in the classrooms, walking the halls. They're looking at student data. They're looking at our GMAS scores, our end of course tests, all of those things that tell us, are we effectively teaching? And some of that means, do we have enough people to do the work? HR also, typically myself, definitely the coordinators, we go out, we meet with the principals, and we talk about, what do you need? What do you see that's coming? We talk with other districts, and what are y'all doing? So that is face-to-face. That could be phone conversations. I think that's really where that fluid process is that this is not just done between a certain time and a certain time. This is done year round. We've already started talking to our principals about what the needs are upcoming. So that's a little bit about what that looks like. There is continual back and forth between building those allotments and talking to finance about our budget. Do we have the budget to do this? And if not, we don't need to cut teachers. Where else are we going to cut? Or where do we need to allocate money to make sure we can get this, whatever it is that we've decided is the most important thing.
Very good. As you pointed out earlier, that what you just described doesn't sound all that linear. Like you could make a nice little flow chart or something. Would be certainly an oversimplification of what it really functions like.
That's correct. And after we build the allotments and we send those out to the principals, we are still tweaking those. As a matter of fact, we just added 2 teachers. So there's never that final cutoff date. It would be nice if we could do that. I would say too, it's so important to try to get those projections right so that we're trying to hire early. We're not adding teachers on the back end. And I can go into that a little bit later on, but yeah, so communication is year round, definitely. And it definitely is not as linear as I'm making it to be, but you got to have all those steps in the process.
Absolutely. Sure. The third question, thanks for the good information so far. It's kind of a theme that I always hit on in the course, because I guess I've always been interested in trying to find that really sweet spot of where the district supports and the expertise and work from the district, but also the important role at the school level and the administrators at the school and teachers of the school kind of pushing up for excellence, and the district folks pushing down. I always find that fascinating, where that balance point ends out. Can you just describe a little bit in Carroll County? You kind of already have done it, I think, as you described the process, but really, what the district is trying to do in this process, and what the school level administration is being allowed to do as well, what their responsibilities are.
Right. This is funny. I could, so many, I guess people think that it's the district office, there's the us and the them, and the them would be the school personnel. And maybe we pretend sometimes it is that way, but truly it is not. There is a lot of overlap in what we do. And because there's so much autonomy too in our schools, then we have to keep that communication open in order to make sure that we are providing what our schools need. But I can give you a great example. I had a principal call me back in the spring when we were working on allotments. And he was interested in adding a position, and called and talked to me about it. And I said, okay, here's a good way to ask for this position. You've got to have a good reason to go over the number we're giving you. So here are some things you need to look at. So it's not just them calling and asking and us saying yes or no. Sometimes it's us even guiding them through, why do you think you need this? Let me help you look in all the different areas you need to look into to know how to even ask for that, especially with our new principals, because it truly is their job to make sure they have what they need, to make sure they have the best of what they need. And so we've got to train them on how to have that argument with us. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on the situation. But again, I'm going back to lots and lots of communication. It is not Mr. Cowart saying, again, our superintendent saying, this is what it is, and then all discussion stops. There is still lots of ongoing discussion. And truly, we work as a team to build the allotments and look at what we need.
So if
Does that
I
answer
were,
your question?
it does. So if I were a principal that I think I've done my homework and my school performance data suggests that we could really benefit from a math coach. I'm just making this up. That if I came to you and said, here's my data that supports this, can I hire a math coach and I'll trade you, one of my 5 social studies allotments or something, you would potentially support something like that if I can support it with data?
Without a doubt. You definitely, if you can support it with data. But let me give you another example, because something that's really important to us too is innovation. We want to keep our kids in our schools. And so we know that we are in competition with not only other public schools, but private schools as well, and some of the things that they have to offer. So, so we're looking for innovation as well. So one of our middle schools has the space and felt very confident that they could provide a very good ag program. That's at the middle school level, which is not typical. Mm-hmm. And they chose to use one of their connections allotments to do ag at the middle school. So there really wasn't a lot of data involved in that. That was, hey, we can do this, and this will put us on the map, because there's not another middle school around that does ag, and agriculture is still a big business in Georgia. So Absolutely. We want to do this, Then we had this past year an elementary school who came to us and said, hey, instead of just STEM, I want to do ag, and we want to teach STEM through ag for our elementary school. So again, not really data to support that, but that's innovation. And so that's another way that we have those conversations back and forth.
Well, you've leapt right ahead to the next question, because it does ask about, how you ensure for innovation and equity and fairness in this process. Do you want to expand a little more on your answer so far on that?
Yeah. So let me go back to just innovation for a second in that I guess there is some suggestion to our principals, not even a suggestion, but we encourage them to be innovative. Not all of our principals are innovative. And so, but what they are all is very competitive. And so when they see another school do something like that, it would cause them to really step up and say, okay, what is my school going to be known for? And that is something that, of course, that we will work. And sometimes it is within the confines of their allotments, they're given allotments. And I guess what our job would be is to help them figure out how to do that within those allotments. Sometimes it may be that we add a teacher. It's just according to what it is and what we can do. So if we push innovation and we support that, hopefully through our allotments. The other thing you just asked about is equity and fairness. And Carroll County, we have a weird setup as compared to most multi-high school districts. And that is we have a high school that's nearly 1,800 students. We have a high school that's at 400 students. So equal is not necessarily fair, and fair is not necessarily equal. So we don't just say everybody gets this or everybody gets that, but we also know that high school that has 400 students, they've got to be able to schedule and get their kids through all the classes that they need in order to graduate, not to mention to make sure that we have classes that introduce them to work outside of school. So they are going to get more staff members than what they earn through their FTE.
Right.
And you may cover that somewhere else, but FTE is a part of that decision as well. But they have to. In other words, if they don't do that, then they wouldn't be able to provide a comparable education to what our high school that's 1,800 people can provide.
Absolutely.
So that's where that fairness and that equity comes in. Also in that process, we look at, as I said earlier, their test scores, because if we have a school that is low performing, we're probably not going to cut them if it looks like they haven't earned all the teachers they have. More than likely, they need to maintain those small class sizes, so there's decisions that are made based on that, how well the students have performed in the past. I can tell you we have 2 schools right now that have been really struggling, and we put an additional AP in. The AP is actually, they get a part-time AP each, is split just to allow for the administrators to be in the classrooms more often, which will make a difference in how well the teachers teach, or theoretically, and then hopefully that the kids will perform better. They didn't earn that. It wasn't even part of the allotments at the beginning. It's one of those things that came about through just looking at the test scores and having discussions with the teaching and learning department.
Well, that's an outstanding answer. I completely followed you. I'm really pleased to hear the way this process works, because it seems you have some standardization and some process, but it's not a blind allegiance to some FTE count or
Right.
whatever, that there's really human judgment coming in here, and information being considered, important information, the right information being considered, and the resources really are being allocated, it seems to me, in a way we would say is makes complete sense, follows a best practice. So, I really
Right.
commend you on what you've described here this afternoon.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I will tell you, I have to add that it's all about relationships. Even in this area, there's a lot of trust between the principals and the district office personnel, so that they know we're looking out for their best interest, for the students' best interest, and we know that they're doing the same thing. And so that allows us to have that open communication to ensure we're doing what we need to do for our students.
Well, there's some universals in this business, isn't there? I think relationship building pretty much cuts across about everything.
Yeah.
Dr. Teal, is there anything else regarding the staffing process that you think is important that I haven't given you a chance to comment on yet?
The way we do what we do is changing. And the reason for that is because we can do allotments all day long, but if you don't have the people to put in those places, then it's not going to do you any good. It doesn't do our principals any good for me to say, you have 2 foreign language classes, 2 foreign language allotments, and they have no foreign language teachers. So we have started those conversations now. We're in our first week of school, and we have now started those conversations for, who do you think is going to retire next year? What positions do you think you're going to need? So whereas I would say at the district office level, we have been thinking about the next year, a year out, for a good long while, but we've not brought our principals necessarily into that conversation as early as we are now. And so I think that our conversation is going to really morph more around what are we doing to keep who we have? Mm-hmm. What are we doing to retain? What are we doing then to recruit those that we need? What are we going to do to make sure that Carroll County Schools is a place where people want to work? All of those conversations are hand in hand with the process of building allotments and staff in our schools. It is definitely a nationwide issue, but I have to tell you, it really has hit home within the past couple of years, and especially it's going to impact us because of the growth. We are 649 students over right now over where we were at this time last year. Some of our schools are that size.
Right. Yeah.
So I think we've got to start thinking a little bit differently about staffing and how we're going to staff and who we're going to let in our classrooms and how we're going to make sure they are successful. And that is even more important than the number of people we're going to hire, if that makes sense. So we're starting that process where I said, we usually start in October, November. We're starting that process now, talking about next year.
Wow. The poor principal hasn't even gotten the kids to know which bus they have to ride on, and now you're already trying to.
That's right. That's right. That is right.
Well, thanks so much for that. As we go back and look over these questions, I'm not going to try to summarize them all at this point, but I remember in your first question, you emphasized the long-term information that you get from I can't remember if you mentioned the name of the company.
Yeah.
That name escaped me already.
No, I didn't tell you the name of it. I can't remember the name of the company.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But you do have a long-term piece in that, and that's something that I was hoping you would mention. That's something that I'm going to emphasize with the students in the class. Again, jump in anywhere you want to here on this. I remember in your second answer, you really stressed the importance of communication as a primary takeaway.
Yes.
Your third question, I think you really described pretty eloquently, what that process looks like. And I don't know if you said they were co-equal, and I don't know whether that matters or not, but it sure sounds to me like the principals and school-based leadership are encouraged and perhaps and certainly allowed to try to be innovative and creative in how they use their staffing. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. Yes.
And again, I think you had a really strong answer for number 4. I wouldn't surmise, I wouldn't do it justice to try to summarize it, but I think you had a real strong piece on innovation. I guess I'll ask you one question on that. How much of that do you think is market driven, or how much of that is just unique ideas maybe that teachers and a leader might have, or is there actually a customer? I mean, are families asking for certain things? Again, I've been at the university long enough. I don't know the answer. I guess that's why I'm asking. Or do you create something that you think people would be interested in?
Yeah, I think it's probably a mixture of everything. Definitely, we have lots of community input. Another thing that I would say in Carroll County that's very different than, say, Douglas County, and I've been in Douglas County before, so I can compare those, and that is that those distinct communities really drive some of that innovation. We have a class at Whitesburg Elementary. I'm not going to say it right, but they have a keyboarding lab. So it is like a music lab, and there's 40 or 50 keyboards in that lab. That the reason they have that lab is because there was a community member who was very interested in music and our students at the elementary level getting music, and they donated that lab. So of course, so that is going to drive that, I would say. At the middle school level, I think the students were very interested in ag, and that may have come from the student body, but then we also had I can't remember who it was, but we had a company who said, we'll help fund this. If you guys build it, we'll help you fund it. And so we can help build a barn. We can help, because, you know, there's money tied to that. So I would say that I don't know if it's fair to say it's market driven, but I would say that it helps when you have somebody helping back that process or that class or whatever innovative idea that you have.
Well, that's always a criticism of schools, is that we're not responsive to our environment or our customers or aware of our environment. Again, to your credit, it sounds like there's a certain sensitivity to that for the unique reasons you mentioned. I mean, I've lived in Carroll County for 15 years. I know the communities you're talking about, and they do have a individual, unique kind of presence.
Right, right.
Dr. Teal, anything else for us to share with my wonderful students this afternoon?
Gosh, I can't think of anything. I would say if they have any questions that come up, you know, feel free to call or email or whatever. I would love to help in any way that I can, because there's got to be people who come and take our jobs and our positions. We're not going to be here forever. So I'm excited that you even have a class of school finance students, and that we are leaving this legacy to other people to do this hard but very rewarding work.
Well said. Absolutely. Thank you.